Two people can go through the exact same thing and come out living completely different lives because of it. Same divorce, same job loss, same betrayal, same diagnosis, same failed business, same childhood, same parents, same trauma. And one person builds from it and one person gets buried by it. And the difference is not what happened. The difference is the story they decided that that thing meant. And this is not just some spiritual bullshit, okay? This is literally, you guys, how your brain works. The event is a neutral data, your interpretation of it. That's the thing that determines what it does to your life. And most people are walking around with interpretations that they never chose. It could be the stories they absorbed from their environment or their family. It could be the wounds, maybe religion, even culture. It's just got you running on autopilot, shaping every decision, every relationship, every risk that you take or don't take, every version of yourself that, allows yourselves to actually become. That means you're not living your life. You're living your story about your life. And until you look at the story directly, you're going to keep mistaking it for reality. You guys, welcome back to Listen Bitch Podcast. I am Brandon Lynette, your voice authority, the voice authority, bitch. Your mess is your message. And today, the mess is the narrative, the one running underneath everything, the one that sounds so much like your own voice that you forgot someone else wrote the first draft. And today, as always, is brought to you by Super Patch. I said I would bring some on, and I totally did not. Okay, but I want to talk about defend today because this episode is about protecting something, not your body, your mind. Okay, but defend all the same. The story running in your head determines the life being built in your hands, and just like defend protects the body from what is coming at it, drug free, no ingredients, vibrotactile technology, telling your immune system to stay ready. You need that same vigilance about what you let into the narrative, what you consume, what you believe, what you agree to about yourself. Okay. The link is in the show notes. Defend is a must have, especially if you have kids in school or you work in the public. Trust me, it is a game changer when it comes to your body's natural defense. Okay. I had a guest on my interview show. I know I'm collecting all these stories. You guys are going to hear all the tea from everybody I interview. So let's just get used to that. Okay. This man had lost everything: business, marriage, most of his savings in about 18 months. By the time he sat across from me, he'd rebuilt most of it. New business, stronger than the original, new relationship, obviously healthier than the one before, different financial situation, but a fundamentally different relationship with money. And I asked him the question I always ask when someone's gone through the fire and came out building instead of buried. What was the thing that changed? He didn't hesitate. He said, I stopped calling it the worst thing that ever happened to me and I started calling it the thing that happened to me. He didn't modify it anymore. Now it was just an event because the moment he stopped assigning the worst thing meaning to it, his brain stopped treating it like an ongoing emergency and he started treating it like information. It's that data. And this is what I want to talk about. The worst thing that ever happened to you is a story. What happened to you is a fact. And you've been confusing those two things for a very long time. The brain does not experience events. It experiences the interpretation of events. And that's not philosophy, that is neuroscience. When something happens, your brain immediately, automatically, below the level of your conscious awareness, runs it through a meaning making filter. And the filter asks, what does this mean about me? What does this mean about the world? And what is safe and possible? And the answer the filter produces is not the truth. It is the prediction based on every previous experience, every message that you've absorbed, every wound that has not been dealt with. The filter is not neutral. It is biased by history. And the story it produces feels like reality because it arrives in your own voice with that full weight of your entire accumulated experience behind it, which means you've been mistaking your filter for the truth probably your entire fucking life. And two people, go through a rejection, same words, same situation, same outcome. Okay. Person one's filter says, this is evidence that I'm not enough, that I should not have tried, that attempting things leads to public failure. Person two's filter says, this did not work. The next thing might. I now know something I did not know before. Person one is going to stop trying. Person two is going to try again. Their lives diverge completely, not because of what happened, but because of the story the filter built around what happened. Babe, your filter is running right now on your business, your relationships, your calling, your past, your future, your body, your bank account, your worth. And the stories it is producing feel like facts. They are not facts. They are the most current output of a meaning making machine that was calibrated by experiences you didn't choose, in circumstances you could not fully control, at ages when you did not have the tools to question what you were being told. The machine can be recalibrated. That's called neuroplasticity. The filter changes when you deliberately, consistently feed it new interpretations, not as affirmations that you do not believe, but as genuinely examined alternatives to the automatic story. Every time you catch the narrative and ask, is this the only interpretation available? Every single time, you are weakening the old pathway and building a new one. The brain is updating. It's slowly, but it does it consistently with repetition. Then the story changes. And when the story changes, the life changes, not because the circumstances changed, because the meaning changed. And you guys, what do we know to be true? Okay, this is the season of rebellion. So I'm not going to have a show and not talk about the people benefiting off of this. The media does not report reality. It reports the most activating interpretation of reality. That's the business model. Okay. Every news story you consume has been filtered through an editorial process designed to maximize your emotional engagement, not your understanding, your engagement, because engagement is what generates revenue. And the interpretations that generate the most engagement are not the most accurate ones. They are the most frightening, the most outrage producing, the most confirming of the worst possible meaning that could be assigned to the events of the day. You've been consuming this manipulation for years. Every piece of it has been running through your filter and updating the calibration, teaching your brain that the world is way more dangerous, way more corrupt, way more hopeless than it actually is. That people are more untrustworthy, institutions are more broken, the future more bleak. And then you wonder why the story you tell yourself about your own life has a dark cloud hanging over it, why the interpretation your filter produces trends towards the worst possible meaning, because you've been feeding it the worst possible interpretations of the world every single day, and the brain learns from the inputs. The food they engineered is doing the same thing to your body that the media does to your mind, feeding it inputs specifically designed to produce a predictable response: craving, dependency, the feeling that what you have is not enough and the next hit is going to fix it. Your body on processed food and your mind on processed news are running the same hijacked program. And the people running both industries know it. They work together. They designed it that way. Y'all, Christ is king. And the king said the truth will set you free. I've read the Bible a few times. Nowhere in there have I read that the news cycle is going to set you free. I haven't stumbled upon words that would translate to the algorithm will set you free. Not the narrative produced by institutions with a financial interest in your fear, the truth. And the truth about who you are. More importantly, whose you are. What happened to you and what it means is available to you. But it requires that specific, intentional daily work of examining the story rather than just living inside of it. And the story is not just in your head. I've mentioned this before, right? The body keeps the score. A lot of people have talked about this. The interpretation your brain assigns to an event produces a physiological response every single time. It's just automatic. So the meaning triggers the chemistry. If you've been running the same story long enough, the not enough story, or maybe the not safe story, the bad things happen to me story, your body's been responding to that story with the same stress chemistry it would respond to with an actual ongoing threat. Cortisol elevated. nervous system on patrol, immune function suppressed, sleep disrupted, all because the story in your brain is running. It's telling your body it's not safe. This is why changing your perspective is not just a mindset upgrade, it is a health intervention. The story you carry about what happened to you has a measurable physiological cost. And the story you choose to tell instead, not a fake positive, toxic positive spin, but a genuinely examined, more accurate, less catastrophic interpretation, produces different chemistry. It'll lower your cortisol, spikes your oxytocin, and a nervous system that can actually rest is your gift, a body that can actually heal. I sat across from a woman in an interview who'd been sick for 3 years. It wasn't dramatically sick, but just chronically persistent, nothing quite working. Sick, super inflamed, fatigue, low grade body revolt that does not have a clean diagnosis, but it's clearly telling you something. And the thing she told me after we'd been talking, was that 3 years of her body not working corresponded exactly to the 3 years of her running to a specific story about a specific betrayal. This was part of her healing journey, putting the pieces together. She'd never connected it. She'd been treating the body separately from the mind because that is what we are told to do. Treat the symptom, manage the condition, take the thing. And what changed for her was not a new supplement or a new protocol. It was a new interpretation of what happened, not a minimizing one. What happened was genuinely fucked up, and she acknowledged that fully. But a different story about what it meant about her future, and about whether she was someone that things like that happened to, or someone things like that happened to and who was now building something different because of it. Her body started responding within weeks, not because the event unhappened, not because someone said they were sorry. It's because the meaning changed. And when the meaning changed, the chemistry changed. And when the chemistry changed, the body had something different to work with. Your body is reading your story right now. So please make sure it is the one you actually want it to run. And I've carried these stories about a specific season of failure that I had labeled. And I kept labeling it for years as proof that I was not cut out for what I was trying to build. And the details of the failure are super unsexy, less important than what I did with the story, which was this. I kept it, I polished it, and I got very good at telling it in a way that sounded like self-awareness. Look how honest I am about my own limitations, right? I've told you guys I went through that shit when what I was actually doing was using the story to manage my exposure. If I acknowledged the failure loudly enough, preemptively, I maintained control over how it landed. I was telling it before someone could use it against me. That is manipulation. And I would say it's a very sophisticated form of hiding. And I was exceptional at it. What I did not do for a long time, fully, for longer than I want to admit, was examine whether the story was actually true, whether the interpretation my filter had produced was accurate, whether what the failure meant about me was the only meaning available, or whether it was just the one that arrived first in the voice of every doubt I'd ever had about myself and felt like truth because it was familiar. When I actually looked at it, you guys, when I sat with it long enough to ask, not what does this prove, but what does this mean if I remove the worst possible interpretation? What I found was that the failure was evidence of trying, of being willing to go in a direction that had not been proven, of being at the beginning of something rather than the end of something. It was not proof that I could not. It was proof that I had. And that is a completely different story. Same events, different meaning, different life that follows from it. The story you are carrying about your biggest failure right now. In fact, I even did this practice, right? One of the biggest events in my life, and this, my coach took me through this process like years ago when my very first coach, I'll say that. My very first coach says, Brandon, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you? Tell me about your worst story. And I'd be like, well, that was probably when my mom signed her rights off on me. And when I told her that story, I was crying. I was sobbing. It took me right back to that moment. And that's when I realized that there was an incredible connection in how I was interpreting this, that my body still thought it was real. And so through understanding everything that I'm talking to you guys about today with that perspective, you know, understanding like, say, hey, maybe this doesn't happen and it means that you aren't where you are now. Take away that event. You're someone completely different in a completely different life. You're married to someone else. You have different kids. Would you take that story away? The worst thing that happened to you, would you take the story away? I said no, because I have created this incredible life and I have these amazing kids, and I knew that this story couldn't own me forever, that I could choose my perspective. So I rewrote the version of the story, and now it is one of the things I am the most grateful for. I am the most grateful for that. It is exactly what I needed. It wasn't that I was unwanted. It wasn't that I was unlovable. It's that that's exactly what I needed to propel me into this present moment, to become exactly who I am with the experience that I went through, so I could be relatable to other people that are out there going through that same shit. Okay. That story you're carrying right now about your biggest failure, your failure, or something that hurt you, you know, the one you keep in the back of the room, the one that just kind of runs as background noise. It's like quiet commentary underneath everything you try. Is that the only story available? Or is it the first story, the automatic one, the one the filter produced before you had the chance to examine it? Because there is another story. There's always another story. And the other story is not denial. It is not toxic positivity. It is not pretending the thing did not happen. The other story is the examined interpretation, the one that takes the same events and builds meaning from them, that serves your life instead of limiting it. And listen, bitch, that story is available. You just have to choose it deliberately enough and repeatedly enough that your brain builds the pathway for it to run. This is the thing that I want to stay with you. Every person you admire, every person who built something real, who came through something hard, who is living a life that looks like evidence that the calling is possible, every single one of them went through the same events you went through and told a different story about it. Not a more accurate story necessarily, just a more useful one, a story that built forward rather than stayed stuck, a story that kept the lesson and released the label, a story that said this happened and here is what I am building because of it, rather than this happened and here's why it's not possible for me. That is not luck. That's not a gift. There's no magic wand saying, hey, let's make this happen. Every conversation I've had on my new show, it's just proven this. It's a choice, a daily, deliberate, unsexy choice that most people never make because they do not realize the story is a choice. They think the story is an event. They think the interpretation is a fact, and nobody ever told them. Maybe nobody ever told you clearly with enough authority that it landed. That story can be rewritten. And I'm telling you right now, that story can be rewritten. Not erased. The events are the events. The pain was real. The cost was real. The people who hurt you did what they did, and it mattered, and it had consequences that were not fair. All of that is true. And also, the meaning is not fixed. What it means about you, about your future, about what is possible, about who you are and what you're capable of, that is not determined by the events. It is determined by the story, and the story is yours. It was always yours, and it's not too late to tell the right one. Jesus told a different story about the cross than everyone around him did. The disciples saw betrayal and defeat and the end of everything that they had believed in. Jesus saw the fulfillment of everything the Father had promised. Same event, you guys. Completely different story. And the story he told, the one he held on to through the betrayal and the trial and death itself, turned out to be the accurate one. The one that was actually true. The resurrection was not the reversal of the story. It was the proof of it. And your story right now is not over. The part you've been calling the worst chapter might be the setup for the best one. That failure you have been using as evidence of your limitations might be the specific credential that qualifies you for exactly the people you're supposed to help. The thing you survive might be the only thing that makes your voice the one that lands for the person who needs to hear it. Tell the right story because it changes everything. Not just for you, but for the people that need you. Pick the one story you've been carrying the longest, the one about the specific event or season or failure or person that has had the most influence on how you see yourself and what you believe is possible. Write it down exactly as you've been telling it. And then I want you to ask 3 questions. 1, is this interpretation accurate or is it the first one that arrived? Question 2, what is the most useful true interpretation of the same events? Number 3, if someone I deeply respected had gone through exactly this, what story would I want them to tell about it? And then, bitch, I want you to write the new story, not the fake toxic positive version, the examined version, the one that keeps the truth of what happened and chooses the most meaning available. And read it every morning for 30 days, not because repetition makes it true, because repetition is how the brain builds the pathway for the new story to run automatically. The brain, it grows where the attention goes, okay? Give it the news story enough time, and it will start finding the evidence for it. Proof and truth everywhere it looks. And when the brain starts finding that evidence for the news story starts feeling like reality, because it is. It always was. You were just running the other one. You have been living inside a story that was written by the worst moments of your life, filtered through a brain that was doing its best with what it had in seasons when you did not have the tools to question what you were being told. That story has been running your business, your relationships, your calling, your body, and your future, just quietly, automatically, without your permission ever since. And this is what I really want you to hold right now. The podcast you have not launched, the message you have not delivered, the version of your life that exists in the gap between who you say you are and how you're actually living. None of it is waiting for better circumstances. None of it's waiting for the season to change. All of it is waiting for the story to change. Right now, there is someone who needs your voice, specifically yours, not the polished version, okay? Not the Instagram curated fake bullshit. Not the arrived version, not the version that exists on the other side of having figured all this shit out. The version of you that has been through the exact thing they are in right now and has a different story to tell about it. That person cannot wait another season while you sit inside the old narrative deciding whether you're ready. Babe, you've been ready. You have always been ready. The story said otherwise, and the story was fucking wrong. If you know it's time, if this is speaking to you and you're feeling this in the core of who you are, in a place that's been running things without your permission, check the show notes, please. Come work with me. Tell me the story that you've been carrying, and let's find the one you were always supposed to tell instead.